up with a solar-powered pump. The marketing students were looking at them and said, how are you selling your crops? Where are you marketing? The business students are saying, we can help you build an online presence. The communication arts students said, let's give you some key things to say so that you can bring some more visibility to you. Computer science, IT students are saying, you know what? We can use artificial intelligence to try and predict your weather conditions or when your crops will come to harvest. Now that is unified learning, using one single project so you can use it, you can learn it from all different angles. Doing it this way as well means that the engineering students can learn of the business students. The business students start to know engineering lingua. Communication arts are not just telling a story, but understand where it's coming from and are able to influence design decisions. Now we implement our ethos and our pillars in how we teach. This is a beautiful picture here of our continent, Africa. And we have designed our curriculum in such a way that we can address key issues within Africa in a unified way to be able to change the continent that we live in. Now, I won't spend too much time on this particular slide because I know my prof will do justice to it. So when he comes to his session, he will look at it as well. Now, talking about mimicking industry and technology trends, AcademicCity believes that developing workforce for the future requires skills and expertise within these fields. Artificial intelligence, biomedical, robotics. And when we say these fields, we're not looking at them just in isolation, but again, coming back to the unified way of thinking, how they synergize, how they work together, how they collaborate, and where they overlap. Now we have this beautiful image behind us, giving you a snapshot of what is possible when you overlap some of these technologies together. If you're looking at artificial intelligence and you're looking at the merge with robotics, the overlap, you start to look at skills and expertise or research opportunities in autonomous systems, drone systems. If you're looking at artificial intelligence over biomedical, then you start to talk about wearable devices. How my clothes I'm wearing today could be tracking me and letting me know, hang on, your temperature is increasing about this degree. So you might be at risk of coronavirus, you better start to isolate. We are getting there, and the overlap between those two programs gives you an opportunity to research in those fields and come up with those devices. Biomedical over robotics, then you start to look at rehabilitation devices, advanced prosthetics, haptic systems. But the sweet spot, what AcademicCity is trying to achieve, and we haven't said we've done it yet, but we are aiming for, is where you see that black star at the moment, where all these three programs overlap. Again, I won't go too much into detail because our professor will go through the programs we're about to launch and how we plan to do it. But we're not just doing this for engineering. We do know that these technologies make an impact wherever you are. So even within our communication arts, we're teaching them the impact of robotics and artificial intelligence. I mean, look at commercial photography. At the moment, you don't go to any weddings and you don't see a drone flying. If you're even lucky, the drone will drop the rings for the groom and bride, right? Digital marketing, and you are familiar with that. Journalism and mass communication, how artificial intelligence, how data science is impacting these industries. So I'll quickly let you know also about the other programs that we do within the Bachelor of Administration. We also said, you know what, we need to revamp this as well. That is why within the core courses that we do, we still include a bit of industrialization, digitization, data, fintech, but ultimately under it all, entrepreneurship. Because ultimately, we want people who will go out there and change the world and people who will start industries. As Albert Einstein once said, we cannot solve our problems today with the same thinking we used when we created them. Thank you and welcome to AcademicCity.
Engineering equipment, they are not teaching aid, which means when you graduate from AcademicCity and you go into industry, these are the same equipment that you're going to be using.
So not only are we giving our students the machines and equipment that's actually used in industry, we can actually assist industry right now with our equipment to generate solutions for them.
And so to have a place like this where they can integrate a classroom into a workshop environment in preparation for what happens in real life when they move away from here, I think that is the added advantage that an AcademicCity college education offers.
So we'd like to say, welcome to the future of learning and real-world problem solving. Thank you.
To say a few things about him. So Dr. Fred Magbagonluri is, to others, an inventor, to others, a writer, but to Academic City, he's the president of Academic City College. To some of us, he's a mentor, and I believe to some, he's even become a father. And during our COVID period, of course, we are still in the COVID period, but when we went down on a lockdown, the lovely thing Dr. Fred did was that he sent out a challenge that, hey, come join me to build a ventilator, because we know there are shortages of ventilators in our country. And the challenge started, and I'm sure after this session, you have the opportunity to see our working ventilator. So without much ado, Dr. Fred, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. We're so excited you could be here with us today. Welcome to Academic City College. Welcome to the future. We believe that the future is here. So, Dr. Lucy is always a difficult follow-up, you know, but I'm going to do my best. I'm going to try to make this as spirited as possible. So I just teamed up this morning conversation around engineering for the future. And obviously, we live in very challenging times where these programs... Okay, is that better? Okay. We live in these challenging times where these two courses couldn't have come at the right time, okay? So just think about people with COVID lying on the streets of Accra. Who is going to go out there and pick them up? You probably want to send a robot, right, to do that. Feed people. Hello? Is it better? I thought I was mic'd up enough. Okay, let's try that. Okay, anyway, let's keep going. I'm going to speak aloud so that hopefully you can hear me. So what I'm going to do is give you a complete overview of what we are trying to do here at Academic City College, and then I'll go into the specifics of these programs. Okay. So here's what President Roosevelt said in 1940, which is still relevant today. Yesterday's answers are inadequate for today's problems, just as the solutions of today will not fill the needs of tomorrow. So we always have to be in an inventive mode. Now, what you see there is a violin and a guitar. And the question that I'll ask is, if you were going to teach somebody to play any of these systems, are you going to tell them a story about it, or you're going to put one in their hands and help them learn it? Lucy spoke candidly about experiential and contextual learning, right? You remember best when it's in your hands. And that's what we try to do here at Academic City University College. She also did justice to our pillars. You know, so you look up there, and these are real-life mock-ups of a bulldozer and a tabletop fan that our students put together. That's what we mean by experiential learning. You look at the bottom, and you have a group of students there with what looks like solar chargers. That is contextual. We're talking about energy challenges in this country. And these projects were done at the peak of Dumso, when there was no light and people were struggling to charge their phones. Unified learning. We need to engage across disciplines. We need to make sure that expertise across disciplines are put together to solve problems. As you will see on the tour, you will see the ventilator, and you realize that the ventilator is not simply a mechanical device. It has some robotics in it, it has some AI in it, it has some biomedical in it. Okay. Then you look at extensional. It's quite interesting that the same technology that you could use today to do prosthetics for the teeth, you can actually use the same technology to make hearing instruments. You can use the same technology to separate Siamese twins. Now, 4 years is not long enough to teach a student all this. But if you could just teach them that the same technology that you apply here could be extended, you have created a whole enterprise for them. Okay? So extensional learning for us means that 4 years is too short. But if we give you the right tools, the right toolkit set, you will go out there and be more inventive. So this is a famous video that I found on the internet. And I'm in love with it because she actually mentions my family name, which is quite interesting. But she's doing what has been done for centuries, right? That they actually grind grain on stones. And if you try to tell these people to use a grinding mill, they will fight you and tell you that it smells of hydrocarbons. The food doesn't taste the same way. So they will rather grind it the way that they are doing. Now, there's no reason why we can't find a solution for this lady that satisfies the conditions that she's laid out. I don't want my dough to smell like there is petrol in it or there is diesel in it. But this is happening today. This video is less than a month old. So I'm challenging my students to come up with a low-cost solution to what she's doing. Let's keep going. I'm sure some of these look familiar to you. So on the top left corner is what we used to call ivory. When I was a young boy, we'll make this as toys, and your friends will push you down the hill, and then you try to steer it. Well, 30 years later, I saw what is to the top right-hand corner somewhere in New Jersey. So somebody creative comes, looks at these technologies and say, I can make money off it. And what is the difference here? Very little. It's still the same wood with wheels. So are we losing our inventions because we cannot take them across that chasm? Then you have what is quite common in the north, the bottom left corner. And traditional women use this to carry firewood. Lots of firewood and other things to the marketplace. And the question is, if we were to do exactly what is on top to this technology, what will it look like? Will it look the same way with sensors and that tells the lady, this firewood is too heavy, you shouldn't carry it? Will it be a system that records how many of such weights they carry every year? Will it transmit information to the doctor saying this person has some vertebrae that have shifted? We don't know. Maybe the solution will not even look like this at all, right? Maybe they just need a little cart that they can drag along. But these are all unsolved problems. If you live in the rural areas and you see these old women carrying this, and you're an engineer, you ask yourself, can I find an outlet for them? And for me, this serves to fire the imagination of our students. So let's keep going. So a couple of years ago, I went to a Brie Gardens. There's a nutmeg tree there, and I plucked one and popped it open. And then I saw this picture on the internet of a custom-made bicycle helmet. And just look at the similarities. That you can even take things in our environment and imagine them as solutions. I mean, nature has evolved over millions of years and has a certain level of intricacy that you can bring into solving problems. And there's a whole field for doing that, okay? So look at how similar it is. And then if you look at the nutmeg, that yellow, the red skin, you can actually remove that, and that is what is used to make, what is this routing gear? When people go rioting or marching and the police spray that stuff on them. That's basically what it comes from. It's really peppery, okay? But there is opportunity in nature, and we live in an environment of nature. So how do you train students to see these opportunities? Now, where is the future headed? We're talking about supersonic flight, flying cars, factories of the future, 3D printing, and these are things you hear all the time. You hear them because that is the future of work. That is where the next generation of work is going to come from. And how are we preparing our students for this new future that is already here. So thousands of years ago, there was a young kid called David. And for those of you who are Christians, you know what he did to Goliath with a sling, right? Where there's a new David sling, and it's a whole lot bigger, and it can do a lot of damage. So if you have missiles coming, David's sling today will intercept them. So somehow, same idea, transition into technology. Okay. So what we are trying here to do here is so important, and Lucy emphasized unified learning. There is no product you are going to develop today that comes from only one specialization. That is why in industry you have sales people at the table, you have marketing people at the table, you have quality people at the table, you have engineers at the table, you have all this cross-functional team at the table to ensure that the product you are going to design finds use and finds sales and is profitable. So we bring the same approach to the way that we teach. Without these cross-functional interactions, a strong curriculum to underpin that, you're going to produce graduates that will remain unemployed. So now let's go to the agenda of today. So looking forward, if you look at the corners of this circle, you will see the traditional engineering programs. What is quite interesting is that anytime you tell somebody I'm an engineer in Ghana, they will say, what kind of engineer are you? Now, in the real world, it doesn't really matter. In the real world, engineers solve problems. So I usually say, what kind of problem do you have? But you have your electrical engineering, which is very traditional. You have your mechanical engineering, you have your computer engineering, we have electronics and communication engineering. These are all heavily traditional. Now, when they evolve, you have to specialize. When these programs become so big, you have to break them into chunks. So if you take mechanical, for instance, civil engineering came from mechanical. Now, what most people do not realize is that even biomedical engineering was started by mechanical engineers, okay? So you need to break it into chunks and to focus because the field is so broad and wide. So we are looking at industrial and systems, and you're going to say, what exactly is that? Now, I'll tell you challenges in our society that could use expertise from here. We all complain about traffic congestion. It always seems like the previous traffic light doesn't know that there's another traffic light before it, right? That's an industrial engineering problem. We're talking about COVID now. We're talking about how to move vaccines around. Industrial engineers designed processes to make things move seamlessly. In the manufacturing arena, when you are building stuff, they figure out how many defects are in your produce and how to optimize the manufacturing processes so that you can improve profitability. If you're making one of these mics, the industrial engineer will tell you what kind of technologies to invest in, and that is definitely going to be different from if you're making millions of them, okay? If you're doing millions, then your industrial guys start talking to your robotics guys to help. So that's robotics. Now, you're looking at robotics. So when I was a student at St. Augustine's College, I was always fascinated by these little fancy boys that will climb the coconut tree so fast, so quickly, and plug them. You've seen that, right? Wouldn't it be nice to have a drone go and plug them? Wouldn't it be nice to have a robotic climber that goes up there to do that? So robots are used in places where you have a lot of repetitive work and you have a lot of danger. So now Ghana has hit oil, we've hit gas. How do you ensure the safety of those pipelines? If you send a human being there, where do you know to send? Which part of the pipe do you know that the problem exists so that you can send a mechanic to go fix it? The future is in sending a robot down there to do the inspection so that you can have targeted places where a human being can be inserted to ensure that these things are fixed. And then you look around us, artificial intelligence. There are so many opportunities in our country to use artificial intelligence, even in our traffic light system, right? Even in our road crossing system. I don't know how many of you stop every single day to allow somebody to cross the road. Think about hunters, hunting animals to extinction. If there was a way to track them so that you will know exactly how many of a particular set of animals do you have, even in your game reserves. Then you can manage wildlife. So the application of artificial intelligence is all over the place. And we are interested in pioneering courses in this area, but in an integrated manner. So these arrows you see shows that each of these programs do not exist in isolation. Okay? They have to be combined in a certain way, in a unified way, so that they can become relevant to real-life practical application. So Lucy talked about the Africa we will all want, right? So in addition to us teaching technical courses here, we teach what we call soft skills. Soft skills mean that no matter what kind of engineer you are, if you're dealing with customers, you need to be emotionally intelligent. You need to find ways of engaging them. You need to make sure that they come back to you as a provider of choice. Now, how did we come about these programs? You guys are journalists. If I were to give a microphone to one of you and say, go to Mokola and interview 20 people about the challenges that Ghana faces or the continent faces, what will they say? I can assure you, they'll say we are bad leaders. We've been singing that for 60 years. So our leaders are the problem. We don't have critical thinking leaders. And if you work with Ghanaians, if you offend somebody, they never forgive you, right? They'll hold a grudge. In many parts of the world, if you offend somebody, you can still go out there and have a drink, and you still work together. In Ghana, they are pissed, and pissed forever. So how do you actually hold very difficult discussions in an environment like that? So we teach test and meaning. And what we try to communicate there is that you can have a different perspective about life. We don't always have to think the same way, but we always need to find a convergence. Okay? So we teach that. Lucy also alluded to the fact that we bring in technologies into this country, and then after a while, they basically fizzled away. It is because the stakeholders are not properly engaged. So we teach technology and society. We teach technology and society to basically educate our students that you can have the best inventions in the world, but if you cannot integrate it effectively into the communities that you live in, they will be rejected. Then we try to solve the unemployment issue, right? We all talk about Unemployed Graduates Association, and we think that we should be deliberate about how we teach entrepreneurship. And everything that you will hear today has an entrepreneurial focus to it. Okay? Then, another thing that they will tell you if you were to go to Mokola is how difficult it is to do business in Africa. Everything from taxation, everything from clearing goods at the airport, everything about bribery. So look, we ground our students in reality that doing business in this part of the world is difficult. And you need to know that before you go out there and be surprised. So Lucy also touched this, and I'm going to touch on it just for a little more emphasis. So the world we live in is not in isolation. I'm sure one of the questions one of you is going to ask me is, how different is your biomedical engineering program from what Legon offers or from what All Nation offers? And this diagram really answers that question. If you do biomedical here, there's going to be a little bit of AI. There is going to be a little bit of robotics. Okay? Which means that there's going to be an integrated approach. And if you see our ventilator, you understand exactly why I'm saying that. Biomedical by itself is not enough. Robotics by itself is not enough. And robotics is not enough because if you look around, our students have been going around the world winning robotic competition, right? A lot of schools have sprung up with robotics projects, but when the kids graduate from these institutions, where do they go? Robots are not toys. They are solutions, and we need to start integrating those solutions into our environment. Okay? So I put this framework up. You can tell that the origins of this one is from here. So this is a project that I worked on many years ago that basically combines 3D scanner technologies, computer-aided design, and an IT infrastructure. And this particular project took a process that used to make one device in 2 hours to 80 devices in 4 hours. So just imagine the sheer power of pulling different technologies together and the kind of results that you get out of it. This technology here took a process that was 25% rejection. And the rejection rate means that anytime the product is sent to the customer, 25% of those products will come back. And anytime those products will come back to our factory, we incur $60 charge per product. With this technology, we reduce that to 2.5. Okay? So there is so much power in a unified learning approach. And what you just saw is exactly what this is. So you have a 3D printer, you have a 3D scanner, and you have a 3D modeler. And without technology, what I call 3D modeler here is not possible. You can't do this product and get it to function the way that it is here without technology. So now let's look at robotics in our context, right? I mean, these are some of the most knowledgeable engineers. Like I said, robotics just did not spring up in isolation. It came out of some of the standard engineering courses that we're aware of. You'll find out there is a software component to it. You'll find out there is a hardware component to it. You'll find out there is connectivity component to it. So you can become a robotics engineer with a degree in mechanical or electrical or computer engineering. You are not limited. It all depends on what your interests are. If you're interested in the hardware component, then you can go into mechanical. But what it also gives you when you focus specifically on robotics is how it pulls all these different bodies of knowledge together into a program, right? And there are a lot of companies that are looking for those specializations. So when I worked in industry, we used to invest millions of dollars every year in buying robots. And when those companies would deliver the robots at our doorstep, that was the last time they would see those robots. We would take their robots, pay them, and take them into the back room and take them apart and reconfigure those robots to do our work. And we would not even allow them to come back in there, because if they see what we do with our robots, then they will sell total solutions to our competition. Okay? So just think about it. A roboticist designs something, gives it to you, and you also have roboticists that take it to the next level. And the previous guy cannot do that because that is your trademark proprietary information that you cannot expose. So you find robotics engineers where there is automation. You find them where there's computer-aided design. Some are programmers. Some spend all their time doing AI. Okay? It is important for us to have roboticists. Not because, just don't think about robots as these huge humanoids walking around. There are robots that are software, and there are probably robots on your phone, right? When you talk about malware, there are agents crawling on your computer. You know, if you use Mac, sometimes you get a pop-up that will say 16, 17 profilers were prevented from following you online. These are all robots, okay? So it used to be that when you talk about robots, you talk about NASA and the GEs, the big, huge companies. But there are robots today that are actually cleaning people's homes, vacuum cleaners. There are robots today that are rescuing people. There are robots in Rwanda that are helping to take care of COVID-19 victims. Okay? It is everywhere. It is in places where accessibility is very difficult. So think about a building on fire that you need to go in and rescue somebody. Who is going to go in there? You can send a robot and you can control it remotely. A couple of years ago, there was a shooting in Dallas, and there was a sniper. Nobody knew where the sniper was, and he was killing policemen. Anytime the police vehicles will arrive at the scene, it will pop up at them, take some shots. They send a robot. In a few minutes, there was silence. Now, what happened is left to your imagination. So, the field is rapidly evolving. Robotics of yesterday is different from the robotics of today. You know, 100 years ago, when a Czech novelist first coined the word robotics, he wasn't an engineer. The word robot didn't come from an engineer. It came from a novelist. And in the Czech language, it's actually rogata, which means a serf, a servant. And he claims that he got it from his brother. But anyway, he wrote the early novels on robotics. And then in the 20s, there was a Russian immigrant. He was a biochemist. Again, he wasn't an engineer. He started writing science fiction. And in those science fictions, he talked about all these creatures, humanoid creatures that have human capabilities. And Isaac Asimov fired the imaginations of thousands and thousands of children, many of whom went and became scientists. Today, some of the things that he described are so real. If you go into Boston Dynamics homepage, you'll find robots dancing to some amazing music. But what we want to do here is to put them into great use, whether it's in welding, whether it's in the medical field, augmented with some experiences from biomedical engineering, whether it's grinding corn for the lady you saw earlier so that she will not have her hydrocarbons in her delicious local cuisine. Those are the things that we want to do. So I mentioned earlier that you can come in from a hardware angle where the relevant discipline is mechanical engineering. So you design the hard parts, and of course, like I said earlier, if you come at it from a unified approach, you choose motors. So you will know more than just the mechanical arm. You will also know the motors to use to run these. Okay. Then software, somebody has to control it. But we're getting to the point where AI is being integrated into robots, which means that robots themselves are going to be able to make decisions. So that is why you saw those 3 Venn diagrams together. These things can no longer be taught in isolation. And if you are in robotics and you are interested in the software components, you can come into it from computer science, you can come into it from software engineering, you can come to it from mechanical engineering. Then connectivity. The electrical guys are interested in making sure that if you have hundreds of robots working together, how do they know who is where? Now there are even drones that can be deployed almost like bees, and they're flying just like you see birds in flight. How do they know not to crash into each other? It comes from connectivity. So you can, and robotics is so broad that one person cannot know all aspects of it, just like in any field. Some people go in because they're just interested in how robots move, the mechanisms that make them move. Some people go in because they are interested in how they sense and touch stuff. Some people are interested in robots because they are focused on how they see things. So it's a pretty broad field. What we are trying to do here is what we call unified robotics, which means that if we are teaching you sensing, how robots sense, we will bring you the electrical engineering aspects of the program that helps you to understand sensing. If we are teaching you navigation, which is how robots move around, we're going to bring the electrical and the mechanical components that make you understand that. That's what we call unified robotics. Okay. So then the area of biomedical. Biomedical engineering is coming, and it's coming fast and furious. It started maybe about 50 years ago by engineers who were interested. They were mostly mechanical engineers who were interested in what happens to the human body in flight. What happens? And it comes from mechanical because even if you look at the courses, you hear things like biomaterials, right? And if you study mechanical engineering, you hear materials. Or you hear biofluids. If you study mechanical engineering, you hear fluids. So anytime you take a mechanical engineering course and put bio in front of it, then you're actually looking at biomedical engineering. But on a more serious note, when I look into the future, 10, 15 years from now, when we are all still alive, hopefully, think about your clothes. Your clothes are on your body most times of the day. You are in your bed 8 hours. How do you get all these systems that you interact with on a daily basis to become part of your continuum of care? So envision a future where your clothes are collecting data about your state of health. Your EKG, your heart rate, your body temperature, your body oxygen. And it is logging all this in the clouds seamlessly. You are not even aware of it. One day your doctor calls you and says, AC, your data is showing some distortions, some anomaly. Can you come into my office right away? Because this data is there, it's available, the technologies are there. Even sleep. You know, sometimes you go to the hospital and the doctor says, are you sleeping well? And then you say yes or no. And it's all subjective, right? Sleeping well and not sleeping well is like beauty, it's in the eyes of the beholder. But if the mattress that you sleep on, or the bed sheets, or the blankie that you put on the bed had sensors in it that collects data about how you're sleeping, then your doctor will have quantitative data to determine whether you are really sleeping or not. There was a technology that I worked on where anytime patients will fall from their beds, the clinics will blame the manufacturer, and we were the manufacturers of the beds. And these are hospital beds, and you're talking about long-term care and hospices where people are jogging towards their sunset and they cannot recollect whatever happens. So you just put a device there, and that device, at any time that bed is moved, it records it. So you can actually come in and recreate the accident scene to determine whether it's the manufacturer who is at fault or something happened with the patient. The other thing that device could do was, you know, sometimes nurses forget to give patients in long-term care and hospices their medicine. So again, when a nurse shows up or a doctor shows up, there's an RFID tag that device actually registers, and that tag number is associated with that person. So you know who came in at what time. Now, obviously, what you don't know is whether they gave them the medicine or not, but you actually know when people come in and go out. Then we got to a point where we're looking at a technology where you come into the hospital, and this is a hospital workflow. You can see I'm moving around. That's what engineers do. I forgot all about your microphones here. You know, when you walk into a hospital as a nurse, you have a little gadget that has all the rooms and patients assigned to you. So at the end of the day, when you are leaving, you scan your badge, and then you scan the badge of the next nurse that is coming in, and you transfer all the patient information. And she holds this gadget. She can see all the rooms, she can see all the patients, and anytime a patient wants to talk to them, it beeps red on the room number, and she goes there. When they are due for their medication, it beeps and they go in there. And at the end of the day, when they are leaving, they will also scan the next person's badge, scan their badge, and check out. So these are all areas in biomedical that is evolving and evolving rapidly. Those of you that have parents that have diabetes, right? What happened? They poke themselves, take a little blood, check their blood sugar level, ongoing basis. But there are technology patches that you basically just slap on your tummy, checks your blood sugar level, and dynamically delivers drugs to your body. Can we do that here? A lot of people die of diabetes in this part of the world because it's a lifestyle disease, because they cannot afford the care. They don't die because there is no technology to address those issues. They die because there is no money to care for them. So can we start having biomedical engineers that can develop simple tools? You know, try to get clutches. I had a friend who was looking for a brace some time ago for the neck. And where did she find it eventually? She found it in Movenpick. Went everywhere and found it in Movenpick. And these are not the most difficult technologies out there. Think about an accident scene where what happens? Your leg is smashed, crashed completely. Well, today, if you go to any of our hospitals, they probably just grab a saw and chop it off. There are technologies today that will take a scan of your good leg, create a mirror image of it, and make a prosthetic to replace the crushed bone. And these technologies are there today. So biomedical engineers basically are at the forefront of these technologies. And again, from a unified learning perspective, it's not just biomedical. We can't just keep isolating them as if they are magicians. They are going to work with mechanical guys. They are going to work with material scientists to make sure that the appropriate technologies aggregate for you to get the results that we have. So we're talking about COVID right now. And we talked about all the shortages of ventilators. We talked about how expensive they are. We talked about when my team visited Kolebu, we actually saw some that have been out of use. Now, most of those gadgets are so sophisticated that if you don't have expertise, real local expertise, you can't use them. If they break down, it is very difficult to fix them. And if there is no electricity, you might as well just forget them. So how do you come up with simple solutions that are reflective of our reality? And I'll give you one example and just move on. I'm almost done. So a couple of years ago, GE went to China to sell ultrasound machines. And China wasn't as developed as it is now. And so transporting these systems into the interior was a big problem. They were breaking down en route. There were electricity problems in the rural areas where they couldn't use them. They were too bulky. So what happened? GE was surprised. They were surprised because they hadn't talked to the customer. Remember, we talked about the soft skills. How do you engage the customer in a way that both of you understand each other? So they went back, pulled together a team, including Chinese scientists, and redesigned the product. They are now portable. There are a lot of portable ultrasound machines now that a nurse can actually carry them. But the irony of the situation was that they actually sold more of those machines in the developed world. After they had designed them for the Chinese market, they realized that in the advanced world, people will also like them portable. And by the way, in Canada, there are places that are over 500 kilometers away from the nearest electricity pole. So there are remote areas everywhere. And so when you are designing, the information you design to has to be unified. Okay. So whether you call it bioengineering, biomed, we all know it's multidisciplinary. You need a little bit of biology and you need a little bit of engineering principles to actually design these systems. If you're designing a ventilator, you need to understand that you're pushing air into a human system. You need to know when the patient is beginning to breathe. Because if you're pushing air in one direction and the patient is pushing in the opposite direction, you're going to kill them. Right? So even though it's a mechanical device, it is performing a biological function and it has to take cognizance of that fact. Okay? So biomedical is advancing so quickly, and that actually reminds me of what my PhD advisor, who was standing here not too long ago, said. He used to teach at Ohio University, and then he transitioned to Princeton. So one day I asked him, I said, what is the difference between Ohio University, which has 65,000 students, and it is a public university, versus Princeton? So he looked at me and he said, Fred, when I was at Ohio State University, most of the students were first-generation students coming from the farms of the Midwest. They had worked on tractors, they had worked on the farms, they were hands-on, they were hungry to be engineers. When I went to Princeton, most of the kids were Northeastern elites. They wanted to be CEOs. So anytime you teach a course that doesn't have bio in front of it, nobody shows up. And you know why, right? Because bio field is evolving so quickly. There are opportunities to build artificial organs. And if you can build a solid artificial organ, you can sell millions of those and make a lot of money because those are lifestyle things. Surgical robots. So why don't you just call it biosurgical robots? That sounds more romantic, or advanced bioprosthetics. So if you didn't teach anything that had bio in front of it, nobody would show up. They wanted high of the end spectrum technology. Okay. So biomedical engineering comes in multiple areas. There are people that are just interested in electronics. Lucy talked about wearable devices. When you get when you get skin burns, you have artificial materials that people are looking at. People are interested in tissue. Some people are interested in trying to figure out what is happening to COVID, what happens to you after you've gone through COVID, you know, all this biocomputational stuff. People are interested in genetic engineering, right? So these are not just simple fields. They are huge and emerging. People are interested in imaging technologies, CT scan, ultrasound, X-rays, MRIs. I talked a little bit about orthopedic. You know, people, when you start getting old, you have hip issues, you have knees issues, you have fingers issues. What is orthopedic surgery doing there for you? Today, you can actually get a transplant of a bone replacement built according to your body. You know, if you need a hip transplant, they're going to take that bone, scan it, extract the bone, build a titanium joint out of it based on your leg, not anybody's leg. And when you do that kind of transplantation, it is easier because it's just a replacement of what you had before. It's not something that you have to grind and polish. And these things are all happening. If you want to study biomedical, you know, as usual, anything you have engineering in Ghana, you have to have some mathematics and physics in order to study it. Again, you can go in and do medical devices, which is what I spend all my life doing, or you can go in there and do tissue. You can go in there and even do instrumentation and computer programming. So it's a pretty broad field. Now, I'm not going to dwell so much on industrial and systems because I told you guys the problems that we have, you know, completely. Even the way our markets are arranged, with COVID coming in, how do we rearrange our marketplaces? You look at our airports, they were built before 9/11. And it's a challenge because those days you could walk a person all the way to the tube and then turn around, right? And all the food places were inside. Now, you are not allowed to go in. And remember, most of the people that used to buy the food were not necessarily the travelers. It was usually the people they came with. And that has flipped over completely. So if you want to redesign the hospitals of the future, it's not just the architects. The industrial guys are interested in it as well. Water, sanitation, pandemics, how you manage and control this, your supply chain, procurement, logistics. Your industrial engineers are at the forefront using complex mathematical systems to figure them out. You know, when I worked in manufacturing, sometimes halfway through the day, the operations manager will come and move workers from one station to the other because there's a backlog in that spot and they need to clear that. And these are all things that industrial and systems guys will do. Now I saw this snapshot that said CEO of the future is an industrial engineer. Of the future, and I agree with that because the CEOs today are actually liberal arts graduates. The CEOs, the former chief of defense staff of the US Army had a bachelor's degree in English. A lot of CEOs have liberal arts undergraduate. They are critical thinkers. So you cannot underestimate the power of integrating critical thinking into everything that you do. So in short, robotics is here. We believe we are the first mover and we have a first mover advantage. We think that our climate is ripe for it. And we had the opportunity to work with WPI, which is Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Worcester, Massachusetts. And they started the first undergraduate program in robotics 30 years ago. So we can learn from their experience. We've built our curriculum around their curriculum. We have a memorandum of understanding with them, and we're going to get a lot of support from them. Biomedical, we know Legon offers biomedical, we know All Nations offers, KNUSC offers biomedical. We believe that ours is distinct because we integrate a unified approach to it. We have a little bit of robotics in it, and we have a little bit of biomedical, we have a little bit of AI in it as well. So on this note, I'm just going to pause and take some further questions from you guys. Thank you very much.
What we have here are real engineering equipment. They are not teaching aid, which means when you graduate from ACity and you go into industry, these are the same equipment that you're going to be using.
So not only are we giving our students the machines and equipment that's actually used in industry, we can actually assist industry right now.
Is there any opportunities that you have put in place to help them also practice more in the country, maybe like internships with other big organizations to practice outside class?
Hello. So the fact of the matter is we expect our students to undertake 4 internships while they are here. So from an accreditation perspective, they are supposed to do 1 industrial internship before they graduate, but we encourage them to do 4. The last statistic I had was a year or 2 ago, 65% of our freshers had an internship. Now, what we also do here is that we have a series of pre-internship guidelines for them. So how to prepare for the interview, dress up for it, write your CV, how you engage the people when you go to career fairs, how you write a thank you letter. And if you follow all this, I think there are 8 bullet points if I remember. If you go through all our seminars and you are ready, we help you find an internship. If you decide you can go find your own internship, that is fine. But we keep track of it, and after the internship, we actually send survey to the employers to say, how did they perform? And pretty much we are looking at the response based on our pillars. You know, are they performing according to the pillars? So that is what we have in place. It has to be 4 internships if you can. If you can, the minimum is the 1. But you are encouraged to do that. Now we are also about to set up a tech center here, where students that have ideas that they want to incubate will find spaces to do that as well. Industries that have ideas that they want to incubate on our campus so that our students can support their development efforts can also come in here. We are 3 years into it, but I think if your first year, 65% of your first year students have an internship, I think it's a good start. Yes, ma'am.
Digitalization agenda.
How do we do what? Sorry.
How do you plan to help Ghana's digitalization
Industrialization efforts.
Agenda?
Agenda, okay. So about a year and a half ago, where I actually met Dr. Lucy Ajipong, we were, I think, among 50 engineers, scientists, and industry stakeholders that were invited by the president to Peduasi Valley Resort. And that's where I met Lucy for the first time, and I just went to her and I said, can you come help me build an engineering program? And the rest is history. But what we took away from that, the main agenda was Ghana beyond aid and industrialization. And after that particular conference, we started our industrial engineering program. We submitted that program. I think KNUSC have an industrial engineering program, but we have an industrial and systems engineering program. So that is one effort. Obviously, not that we've been trying, we worked very hard to develop a ventilator when everything else had shut down. So we are making the effort as a small startup university. You know, we are not cowering down. In times of national crisis, we actually rise to figure out how we can help. So the ultimate objective, you know, with programs like this in biomedical, programs like this in robotics, is really trying to prepare these kids for the jobs of the future. I alluded to the fact earlier that now we are exploring for oil and gas. If you don't have people who have skills in robotics, that can go down there or send agents down there to figure out what is going on with these systems. What's going to happen? We're going to have foreigners come in and do this work for us. And even though the government will tell them explicitly, you need to hire this many Ghanaians, they can also go back to the government and say, sorry, we couldn't find any. That's why we have experts here. So it's retooling our students for the jobs of the future, but also for needs that are coming right now. Is that good? Questions? This is a press briefing, you know, so I expect you guys to ask me all the questions on earth.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. I think you can pull down your, if you don't mind. Okay, thank you.
Yes, I have a little problem.
Okay.
It has to do with the cycle where politicians are always all over the media and addressing engineering issues when they are not engineers. How do we deal with this? In a situation where, or should it start from here after this session where we have to get close to you? Anytime there's an engineering problem, we call upon you, you come and explain issues, because the politicians are not helping us. They play it to their gallery, and then at the end of the day, you don't get to understand what the real issues are, especially from the engineering perspective. So, Doc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a difficult question. I say it's difficult because I'm not a politician, at least not yet. Although my wife tells me everybody that is married is a politician. Look, I think it's a cultural thing. It's a cultural thing. Even if you look at the pandemic, all the spokespeople for pandemic were not from Noguchi. They were not from Noguchi. They were politicians calling all the shots, and they've always done that because they have a stranglehold over the bureaucracy. You know, and it's not just in Ghana. I mean, you guys saw what Trump did to Fauci, right? Because there are political implications of the issues as well, and they have to hijack it. They have to control the narrative, and they control the narratives in the way that best serves their interests. It's not a third world problem. It's a global problem. It's just like economics. You know, you can't talk about economics in isolation or talk about politics in isolation. The stock market could be going up today. Some silly political event occurs in Myanmar, and the stock market in New York hits the ground. So, look, I think what we need to do is to start becoming a knowledge-driven economy. You know, a nation that is based on facts and data and not on gut feelings. And it will be a cultural shift, to be a real cultural shift. But the politicians are not going away anytime soon. Now, one question I got asked from time to time when I talk about robotics is, wouldn't they take jobs? Well, my simple answer is, which jobs? Which jobs are they going to take? Look, I'm sure when the first vehicle was made, people were wondering what will happen to horses, right? We are still riding them. They don't travel as far as they used to. But just think about, think about robotics in terms of the three things that I mentioned: the hardware, the software, the connectivity. We need people to develop skills in these areas because that's where the jobs are going to be. You know, the other thing that is quite interesting is that if you are interested in any of these fields, you have to go through retraining. You know, I have a story about when I was just before I came back to Ghana, I used to sit on my undergraduate industrial advisory board. And what we would do every year is to show up, and the students will present their final year projects, and then we give them feedback, and then we grade them, and then they graduate. So on my last visit, which was 2014, these 4 kids were so excited to show me their final year project. They were so excited to show me their final year project. So I followed them to this workshop. And I remember that workshop very well because when I was undergraduate there 20 years before, it was electronics lab. It wasn't a manufacturing lab. And then there was a short one among them. He came straight ahead and said, you see these robots? There were 6 robots. We built them. I'm like, you did? I said, yeah, we built them. And it was so infectious with such pride, you know. And I said, how did you come to build them? He said, well, Dr. Fred, when the financial market crashed and people were losing their jobs, we wrote a grant application to the US Department of Labor, and we asked for money to buy robots so that we could retrain workers for the high-tech industry. Think about that, retrain workers who were being retrenched into new fields. I said, okay, what happened? He said, we got $50,000. But when we went to the marketplace, the cheapest robot was more than $50,000. So we couldn't even afford it. So we decided to build them. So we machined all these parts and we bought the motors and we assembled them. I said, how many people have you trained? More than 200, 250 maybe. I said, so you build trainers, right? Yeah. So now what are you going to do when you graduate? And that was like a strange question for them. They hadn't thought about it. One said, oh, I have a job with GE. The other one said, I have a job with Cummins Aircrafts. Another one said, I had a job with Boeing. So I said, what is going to happen to this lab when you're gone? And then the shoulders went on, I don't know. I said, but when you guys went looking for robots, low-cost robots, you couldn't find any. Don't you think this could be a business? You could walk away from here and start your own business making low-cost robots for training. But you see, we configure the students to believe that you always have to graduate to go find a job. You always have to graduate to go find a job. And that is why here at Academic City, our students go through 4 modules of entrepreneurship. So that you can find opportunity in everything that you're studying, in every project that you're working on. You should be asking yourself, if this is a project worthy of me putting time onto it, could it be useful for somebody else? Could it be useful? So we need to stop teaching our students to think that a university degree is an opportunity to go find a job. Who is supposed to create that job for you? So I would like to see students coming out of robotics, developing systems, and there are needs here. I got a call from MIM Cashew Nuts in MIM Suhum about a year and a half ago. And what did they want? They export fried cashew nuts. The cashew nuts come in different colors. They want an optical system to be able to sort them into those colors. Apparently, different colors sell differently. And they were just bagging them, so they were leaving money on the table. That's robotics. That's perception. That's machine vision to be able to help them. So there are opportunities here. We just got contacted recently. Lucy, what's the name of that company in Sawam? Kwesi? HPWO, and they sell the. You want to tell them a little bit about it?
So we went to HPW Dry Fruits. They sell dry fruits, bananas, mangoes, and pineapple, and they ship about 85% of their produce to Europe. So their market is mostly in Europe, not even in Ghana. And then we went there to look at what equipments that they have and how we can add and help them build bespoke machinery to solve their problems. We also looked at their manufacturing plant, and we also proposed solutions how they can become more efficient. And we went with representatives from both business, IT, and engineering students who were very instrumental with identifying how they can streamline some of their processes. So lying in with robotics, one of the things that we saw is that one of their production plants, they had a lot of manual workers. So we have women who were chopping up pineapples, and they chop up the pineapples. We have several women lined up across the conveyor belt, and they chop it. And they also had equipment that's meant to chop it. But the women were faster because the women were afraid that the machines are coming to take their jobs. So when they configured the machine and they could do it in 1 minute, the women would do it in 30 seconds because they were fighting for their jobs back. We do think that the future is how do we give these people new skills so that they can help develop these machines, which can be a bit more efficient and release them from some of the economic stress as well.
All right, there was a question here. If you don't mind, please.
Industrialization.
Digitalization agenda. So that's what the vice president is driving, right? How are we going to help them to do that? That's a good question. That sounds like a consulting question. I mean, I think we cannot overemphasize the need for that, especially in light of what is happening now with kids at home, unable to go back to school. I think some of these schools are already shutting down like JIG just did. So we need a digital transformation. The digital transformation will start from us relooking at education from a different angle. Until COVID, and I don't know if that has changed yet, but online education was something that was frowned upon in Ghana. So if you had a degree that you obtained online, National Accreditation Board would not give you clearance for you to teach at a university. So if you have a PhD today online, you can't teach in any of the universities in Ghana.
Then COVID comes, boom, where nobody could go to school. You have to sit at home. Content has to be digitized. I still haven't heard the discussion on the policy angle, whether that has been relaxed, that has been changed yet. If you look at even from the 3D technology perspective, today companies sit in the US, they design electronic parts, and I'm not going to put that in isolation. I'll actually put that in the context of stuff that I worked on, that we develop a software that you could go into an audiologist's office, for instance, in Copenhagen, Denmark, okay? And the audiologist will put you in a booth and put some earmuffs on you and read your ear loss, and then they will scan inside your ear and then load it directly on the computer. And as soon as they hit finish, that order is in China. In real time, I'm talking about seconds. The Chinese guy, and then a card prints out. The Chinese guy takes the card, he doesn't know where it comes from. It could be from Italy, it could be from Jamaica. Scan the barcode, your devices show up on the screen, they model them. As soon as they hit finish, it's in Singapore. So Singapore is now the manufacturing center. They manufacture it, put it in a box, it's at the airport. A completely digitized workflow. Now you look at Ghana, for instance, if you've ever walked into town and country planning department and see the amount of papers you have on the ground all the way to the ceiling, you will now understand why you need to go pay somebody to find out where your document is. Now, that is not bribe, that is frustration fee. Because your document is embedded with thousands over the years, it's not anywhere. And the question is, even if we transition to digitization today, what is going to happen to that legacy document? So I think it has to be a national policy. I mean, even registering a business now, you can still do it online, but they still expect you to fill the forms and bring them. So, I mean, if you ask me what we are going to do, we're going to train the engineers, train the scientists, but I'm also hoping that these kids will start seeing opportunities in these areas to set up startups. If a startup shows up at town and country planning, and I use Adenta, because that's where I know best, and I've seen it with my own eyes, and say, we can digitize this for you, one document for 10 CDs or 20 CDs. I think that would be a good start, but I know the answer. They'll be like, we don't have this money in our budget to do that. And even if you did it for free, we may not be interested. So anytime government is involved, it has to be policy driven. So I think we can react if there is a clear policy that is their intent. I think we can even have student volunteers go out there and do this work. if there's a policy direction that we think will utilize the results. But as of today, if there is none, if you walk to any of these offices and offer free services, they will reject it. I saw a hand somewhere. Yes, sir. So digital transformation is the way to go, but it has to be in sync with national policy.
Often we know if
Can you pull down a little bit? Mm-hmm.
Often we know if
No, pull down.
Often we know if you are to do these courses, you have to have the science background. But I think there are a lot of talent out there. People who do things like you feel they are very creative without having that science background. Yes. So what happens to these people? Because I'm a general student, I did communication. I would probably want to do engineering, and I may be talented, but without a science background, is there any opportunity or alternative for people like this? Yeah.
That's a very, very, very good question. That's a very good question. You know, our society doesn't make room for people on the fringes, and sometimes that is really where creativity is. So when NASA was thinking about heading to Mars with a new rover, you know who they went to? They went to these guys who fix cars under trees. They reconfigured their cars for racing in the desert, on the mountains, rugged terrain. Rugged terrain. They did not go to GM. They didn't go to Ford. They didn't go to BMW, Mercedes. They went to guys who build vehicles that fly in some of the toughest places in the world that mimic Mars. Unfortunately, in our society, these talents are marginalized. I can tell you the top robotics student that I have on this campus is an IT student. And he's an IT student because he didn't have the math requirements to go into engineering. But he runs a robotic camp. His students have won competitions. I was talking to him yesterday about building and selling low-cost robots. So even though they have no room, quote unquote, in the formal sector, I think what we can do is to offer certification. We can do some short programs in robotics for them, give them certification. I think they can come in and do entrepreneurship. Because remember, if you are an entrepreneur, you don't necessarily have to be the one with all the robotic skills. You just need to know how to run a robotics company. So I think we can come to it at that angle. Now, if you ask me my personal opinion on how to get into engineering and all that stuff, I just said free for all. You come in, and if you survive the first 2 years, you are in. That's how it's supposed to be. It's, you know, you have kids making decisions about school when they are 14 years old. And when they are 60, they are still being haunted by the decision they made when they didn't really know what the real world was. We don't have school counselors. We still don't have school counselors. Unless you go to a private school, then you have a school counselor who will tell you, here are your options in life. And yet, we produce a lot of graduates in psychology and sociology, right? And then we say there's no jobs. But there are jobs. Put them in high schools and primary schools and kindergartens and let them be counselors. We said nurses are home, they can't find jobs. But every school, every kindergarten, all the way to university should have nurses. This is COVID now. Nurses should be able to be watching these kids to figure out whether they are okay or not. So there is just so much opportunity. We just need to reconfigure ourselves as to how we see those opportunities. Because there is no course in the university for which there is no job. There is. We just have to create them. So I think the long and short of an answer for you is that we will do some certification programs for them, but they shouldn't be discouraged because they don't have a degree. You can still survive without a degree. Bill Gates doesn't have one. You know? Yet. Who knows? He might get one when he's 80. Questions?
I think we also going to have media interviews.
Okay.
I'm sure some of them will personally come to you or the agency for the personal media interviews. You have them here as well.
Sure. So I appreciate your time, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. So we shall have the media interviews, and from there we shall continue with the campus talk.
Preparation for what happens in real life when they move away from here. I think that is the added advantage that an academic city college education offers. What we have here are real engineering equipment. They are not teaching aid, which means when you graduate from academic city and you go into industry, these are the same equipment that you're going to be using.
So not only are we giving our students the machines and equipment that's actually used in industry, we can actually assist industry right now with our equipment to generate solutions for them.
And so to have a place like this where they can integrate a classroom into a workshop environment in preparation for what happens in real life when they move away from here, I think that is the added advantage that an academic city college education offers. What we have here are real engineering equipment. They are not teaching aid, which means when you graduate from academic city and you go into industry, these are the same equipment that you're going to be using.
So not only are we giving our students the machines and equipment that's actually used in industry, we can actually assist industry right now with our equipment to generate solutions for them.
And so to have a place like this where they can integrate a classroom into a workshop environment in preparation for what happens in real life when they move away from here, I think that is the added advantage that an academic city college education offers. What we have here are real engineering equipment. They are not teaching aid, which means when you graduate from academic city and you go into industry, these are the same equipment that you're going to be using.
So not only are we giving our students the machines and equipment that's actually used in industry, we can actually assist industry right now with our equipment to generate solutions for them.
And so to have a place like this where they can integrate a classroom into a workshop environment in preparation for what happens in real life when they move away from here, I think that is the added advantage that an academic city college education offers. What we have here are real engineering equipment. They are not teaching aid, which means when you graduate from academic city and you go into industry, these are the same equipment that you're going to be using.
So not only are we giving our students the machines and equipment that's actually used in industry, we can actually assist industry right now with our equipment to generate solutions for them.
And so to have a place like this where they can integrate a classroom into a workshop environment in preparation for what happens in real life when they move away from here, I think that is the added advantage that an academic city college education offers. What we have here are real engineering equipment. They are not teaching aid, which means when you graduate from academic city and you go into industry, these are the same equipment that you're going to be using.
So not only are we giving our students the machines and equipment that's actually used in industry, we can actually assist industry right now with our equipment to generate solutions for them.
And so to have a place like this where they can integrate a classroom into a workshop environment